It was mainly from my mother and grandmother, who both had the same long-term condition for many, many years, were often quite poorly at home, but wouldn't be admitted to hospital, mainly because they were leaving families behind, and they had nobody to look after those families. So it often fell to me to look after them both, and that kind of provided me with the passion to go on into a career in the caring profession. When I was in my final year at school, we were all invited to interviews with a career officer, and I can still very, very well remember the interview that I had. And he asked me, "Have you any idea what you want to do when you leave school?" And I said, "Yes, I want to be a nurse." And he was actually quite horrified. And he couldn't understand why I want to be a nurse. He said, he says it's poorly paid and it's really long hours, and you're surrounded. At the time where I lived, there was a couple of really big factories who were big employers in the area. There was also the local ministry, who were also big employers, and he just couldn't understand why I chose to be a nurse as opposed to working for one of these other employers. Anyhow, fortunately, even though he wasn't supportive in that respect, I did have a very supportive deputy head teacher who also had a good friend who was a matron at Newcastle General Hospital, as it was then. And she encouraged me to write to this friend and say that I was interested in nursing and could she help at all. And she did. I actually started as a nursery nurse the following month after writing to her on the maternity unit, looking after extremely small babies, all premature babies and babies who've just been delivered. I've now been nursing, it'll be 54 years next month. Big changes I've seen are certainly the move from hospital-based care to community-based care. There's lots of focus on admission prevention, admission avoidance, trying to keep people at home, improve patient outcomes and prevent ill health, as well as obviously caring for people who actually are ill. The change as far as technology is concerned has been really, really massive. I can remember when I first started in the community, there certainly wasn't mobile phones, we didn't have laptops, agile devices. We communicated usually via public telephone. We're lucky if usually there was one bleep per team, and we used to share responsibility for having that bleep. But then, if the bleep did go off, that you then had to, because you're out and about as a community nurse, you then had to find a public telephone box that worked to make a phone call to base to find out exactly what it was that you were being called for. Whereas now, we're surrounded by technology, we've got laptops, we've got agile devices, we communicate electronically, and it just is a massive change. I think the transition from when I first started nursing in 1970 to where I am now as a clinical operational manager, I think that's for me is a massive achievement. Getting my degree was a really proud moment as well. I was the first member of my family to obtain the degree, so that was a really proud moment. Getting my Queen's Nurse Award was an extremely proud moment as well, and then to go on and represent district nursing in the Queen's Nursing Institute at a garden party at Buckingham Palace was another very, very proud moment as well. I would advise anyone thinking of becoming a nurse to be inquisitive, ask lots of questions, don't be frightened to ask questions. It's important that you are inquisitive, to be an advocate for the people you care for, and also for patients' families as well. That's really important. To be self-aware, but also to be aware of your own health and well-being. That's really important, to look after yourself as well.